And we're looking at them thinking, why would you do it that way? Well, first of all, because they're not you. Different doesn't automatically mean dysfunctional. Different doesn't automatically mean unhealthy. And different certainly doesn't mean broken. Sometimes the first question that we need to ask isn't, how do I get them to change? Sometimes the first question that we need to ask is, does this actually need to change? Or do I simply need to accept that this person is different from me? Welcome to the Bounce Back Black Woman podcast. I'm Dell, coach, author, mom, and your sister along this journey of healing, growth, resilience, and living more intentionally. As Black women, we know all too well that life can break our hearts in more ways than one. But here in this space, we heal, grow, rebuild, and bounce back together. Because it's not just you. It's not just me. It's us. Hey there, my friend, and welcome back to Bounce Back Black Woman. I want to kick this episode off by asking you a question. Have you ever looked at someone that you love and thought to yourself, if they would just listen to me? Maybe it's your spouse or your best friend. Maybe it's your brother or your sister or one of your parents. Or, and every parent of an adult child just leaned a little closer to the speaker, your grown child. Because you can see what they're doing. You can see the decision that they're making. You can even see the pattern that they keep repeating. And you can see the train coming down the tracks. And you're standing there waving both arms, yelling, "Move!" And they just keep standing there. Or maybe nothing that they're doing is particularly destructive. You just know that if they would do things a little differently, their life would be easier. And so because you love them, you try to help. You give advice. You make suggestions. You send them the article. You send them the podcast episode. You tell them what worked for you. You have the conversation once, then twice, then 17 more times with slightly different wording, because apparently the problem is that you haven't found just the magical combination of words yet to get through to them. And eventually you find yourself frustrated, exhausted, maybe even a little angry, wondering to yourself, why can't I get through to them? My friend, maybe you can't. Maybe you can't. And today I want to talk about the reasons why. There are 5 real reasons that you can't fix somebody that you love. And before we get into those 5 reasons, I want to start by unpacking that word, fix. Because people aren't broken appliances. When I say you can't fix someone you love, I'm not suggesting that there's necessarily something wrong with them. I'm talking about that very human-like instinct that we have when we love someone. You know, I want to make this better. I want to solve the problem. I want to protect you from the consequences. I want you to see what I see. I want you to stop doing something that I believe is hurting you. Or sometimes, if we're really willing to be honest with ourselves, maybe it's just, I want you to do this thing the way I think you should do it. And those are not all the same thing. Because there's a difference between destructive behavior and behavior that's simply different from what you would choose. There's a difference between supporting someone who has asked for your help and repeatedly trying to change someone who hasn't asked for your help. And there's a huge difference between loving someone and assuming responsibility for how their life turns out. So let's talk about 5 reasons that you may not be able to quote unquote fix someone that you love. The number one reason, and get ready, they may not be broken. They may just be different from you. Let's start there. Sometimes what we're calling a problem isn't actually a problem. What it is a preference. Your spouse doesn't communicate the way that you communicate. Your friend doesn't handle conflict the way that you handle conflict. Your adult child doesn't prioritize career, marriage, or money, or even success the way that you do. Your sibling parents differently than you would. Your parent wants to spend their retirement doing something that makes absolutely no sense to you. And we're looking at them thinking, why would you do it that way? Well, first of all, because they're not you. Different doesn't automatically mean dysfunctional. Different doesn't automatically mean unhealthy. And different certainly doesn't mean broken. Sometimes the first question that we need to ask isn't, how do I get them to change? Sometimes the first question that we need to ask is, does this actually need to change? Or do I simply need to accept that this person is different from me? Because my friend, those are 2 very different problems. Number 2, they may not actually want to change, even if you think they need to. Let's move into situations where there really is something that's causing difficulty. Maybe your best friend complains about the same relationship every time you talk. And you listen, you comfort her, you tell her what you think, she agrees, she says, you know what, you're right. And then 3 days later, we're right back here. My friend, at some point, you may have to recognize that the fact that you want something different for her doesn't mean she wants something different badly enough to change it. And that can be incredibly hard when you love someone, because we can see their potential sometimes. We can see the consequences. We can see a different path. But you cannot manufacture readiness in another human being. You can't want sobriety for someone more than they want it for themselves. You can't want financial stability for someone more than they want it for themselves. And you certainly can't want a healthier relationship for someone more than they want it for themselves. You can't want healing, growth, peace, therapy, a better job, or anything else enough for 2 people. What you can do is encourage change. You can support change, but you cannot choose change on somebody else's behalf. Number 3, you may not be speaking their language. Now, this one is a little different because sometimes the person actually does want help. They just don't need the kind of help that you keep trying to give them. Maybe your young adult child calls you and says, "Hey, Mom, I'm really struggling." And before they've finished their sentence, you've got a whole 7-point action plan because, hello, we can fix this. But maybe they weren't asking for an action plan. Maybe they just simply needed to hear, "That sounds really hard. I'm here for you." Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you've been offering encouragement and reassurance, but what they are actually saying is, "Mom, I need your help in figuring out what to do." You see, sometimes we love people in our language. We help them in our language. We communicate in our language. And then we're frustrated because what we're offering isn't landing. One of the simplest questions that we can learn to ask is this: what would be helpful to you right now? Or maybe even this version: Do you want my thoughts, or do you just need me to listen? That, my friend, is a powerful one because it invites them to sit and think about what it is they're really asking for, because maybe they are not sure. And when you offer the wrong thing, they know then and they feel alienated or upset. Being invited into someone's struggle doesn't automatically mean that you've been assigned to solve it. So asking whether or not you just want my thoughts or you just need a safe place to vent can help you discern what's expected of you. Number 4, you might be trying to solve the problem that you see instead of the problem that they have. And this one happens more than we realize. And it's one that requires curiosity. Let's say that your parent refuses to move out of a house that's clearly becoming too much for them to handle and maintain on their own. You see the problem, the house. It's too big. The stairs are difficult to navigate. The maintenance is expensive. And obviously, to you, the solution is to move. Except that maybe that's not the problem your parent is experiencing. Maybe that house represents independence for them. Maybe that house is the last place that they lived with your other parent. Maybe leaving it feels like they're admitting that they're getting older and frailer. Maybe they're terrified that the next move means losing control over their own life. And suddenly, this isn't really just a real estate problem. This is a grief problem, or an identity problem, or a fear problem. And your perfectly logical solution doesn't help any of those things. It really doesn't even touch on them. And that is why curiosity matters. Before we can decide that we know what someone needs, we need to stop and ask, what does this mean to you? Because the thing that's obvious from the outside, looking in, may not be the thing that they're actually wrestling with on the inside. And number 5, their life is not yours to write. And this might be the hardest one of all, especially when the behavior really is destructive. Because I don't want us to turn this conversation into, well, everybody's different, so just let people do whatever they want. No. Sometimes the thing you're seeing is harmful. Sometimes someone you love is drinking too much, or spending money recklessly, or remaining in an abusive relationship, repeatedly creating crises, treating you or other people terribly. And loving them does not require that you pretend not to see it. You can say, I'm concerned about you. You can tell the truth. You can offer help. You can offer resources. You can pray. You can establish boundaries. You can refuse to fund the behavior. You can refuse to cover for them anymore. You can even refuse to participate in the dysfunction. But even then, their life still isn't yours to author. And that's where this conversation takes a shift. Because maybe you've spent this whole episode thinking, okay, Del, so if I can't fix them, what am I supposed to do? And friend, that's the question I really wanted us to get to. Because while you may not get to choose what they do, you still and always have choices about what you do. You can choose how to communicate. You can choose whether to communicate. You can choose whether you offer advice or simply just listen and nod. You can choose what kind of support you're willing to provide, physically, emotionally, financially. You can choose your own boundaries, and you can choose what behaviors you will and will not participate in. You can choose how much access someone has to you, and sometimes you can choose whether or not you stay. And that's difficult to say when we're talking about someone that you love. I know. Because love can make us believe that staying is always the loving choice. But it isn't. Not always. And leaving isn't always the right choice either. Sometimes the answer is staying and communicating differently. Sometimes it's staying and establishing a boundary firmly. Sometimes it's allowing an adult child to experience a consequence that you could have easily rescued them from, but maybe they need to experience it for themselves and they'll learn a lot more. Sometimes it's telling a sibling, I love you, but I can't keep doing this with you. Sometimes it's accepting that your friend isn't going to make the decision that you desperately wish that she would make. And sometimes it's recognizing that that relationship itself is costing you something that you can no longer afford to give. You might not get to choose whether they change. You honestly don't get to choose whether they change. But you do get to choose your proximity to what it is they keep choosing. And that's where love and control have to separate. They have to part ways. Because love says, I can deeply care about what happens to you. But control says, therefore, I need to determine what happens next. And those, my friend, are not the same thing. Not at all. And maybe the hardest form of love is learning to hold someone with an open hand, to tell the truth in love, to offer support, to be present, to pray, and then to let it go. Release the outcome. Because their choices belong to them. And yours belong to you. There's a verse in Galatians that I think speaks beautifully to this tension. It's from Galatians 6:5, and it says, for we are each responsible for our own conduct. That's it in a nutshell. It doesn't mean we stop caring about one another. In fact, just a few verses before that, Scripture tells us to help carry each other's burdens. Both things are true. We are called to support one another, to love one another, to show compassion, and help carry burdens. And each of us remains responsible for our own choices. I think sometimes we confuse carrying someone's burden with carrying their responsibility. Those two things are not the same. Faith doesn't require you to control the outcome. Sometimes faith looks like doing what love requires of you and trusting God with what belongs to them. So here's your challenge for this week. Think about someone that you love who you've been trying to help or change or rescue or, yes, maybe even fix. And ask yourself 3 questions. The first one, did they actually ask me to solve this for them? The second question, what part of this situation genuinely does belong to me? And the third, what choice is mine to make now? Maybe your choice is just to listen. Maybe your choice is to ask a better question. Maybe your choice is to stop giving unsolicited advice. And ouch, that one hurts. Maybe your choice is to establish a boundary. Maybe it's to offer help one time and then stop chasing them with it. Maybe it's to stay, and maybe it's to go. But whatever your answer is, I want you to remember this. You can love someone deeply without taking responsibility for becoming the author of their life. Their choices belong to them, and yours belong to you. Well, that's it for today, my friend. I really hope this episode inspired, encouraged, or just plain comforted you. If so, please share it with a friend who might be struggling in her own healing journey. And if you take a moment to leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts, you'll help other women find encouragement through their heartbreak. Remember that God is holding your hand along this journey. And guess what? I'm holding the other. Life is short, so bounce back, Black woman.